Hi everybody, today we're going to be talking about the always fun and slightly tricky topic of emotional eating. Many of us deal with this whether you are a dancer or not. If something bad happens, if something good happens, and you kind of use food as a crutch and you end up eating way more than you should or want to, that's emotional eating. And so I hope my tips help you with this. I know a lot of you are dealing with it and you've written to me about it, so let's get into it. So the first thing I want to say is that emotional eating is completely different than mindless eating. Mindless eating is when you sit down in front of the television with a bag of chips, you look down and it's gone. You didn't think about it, what happened. You might be snacking while you cook. That's mindless eating. Nothing to do with emotion, nothing to do with feelings. However, some of the things you can do to fix emotional eating, you can also do to fix mindless eating. So just be aware of in your own life, which one are you doing, if any? Are you just kind of eating without thinking about it? Or does something bad happen and you come home and you stuff your face out of misery and then feel awful? That's emotional eating. Does something great happen and you come home and eat a lot? Does something bad happen, you come home and eat a lot? Emotional eating is not always due to bad emotions. I know a lot of people that, get a promotion at work and then because for whatever reason come home and stuff their face and feel guilty about it. Usually it's because we don't feel like we're deserving of that promotion or that's something good. But of course, more commonly, something bad happens at work, something bad happens at school, you didn't get the part you wanted, you didn't get the whatever you wanted, you come home, you say, oh, forget it, and you just eat whatever you want, and then you feel awful. Anybody been there? Been there. And what tends to happen then is it just becomes this awful cycle because you eat a lot, you feel awful, and then you're like, well, I'm fat and ugly anyway, so why should I keep going on my diet? So you eat even more. So how do we fix this? Well, the first thing to do is just be aware. You've probably heard this a million times, but I would start writing down everything you're eating and what you're feeling when you're eating it, because that will really bring attention to why. It's not even so much about the food. People who eat emotionally, it's never about the food. It's never because you want an entire bag of candy or you want an entire thing of ice cream. It never is. It's about why. When a circumstance like that happens, write it down and write what you're feeling. Because once you start to identify this, then you can start to see, okay, it's not because I actually want that food. It's because I'm upset. It's because this happened. It's because I'm excited. And so I almost don't feel like I'm deserving of that, so I'm going to go home and blow my diet. So if you have an episode of emotional eating, write it down every time. You can even start, if you really want to get serious, you can write down everything you eat, not just what you eat, but what you're feeling. People always say, oh, write down everything you're eating to help fix your diet. It's never really about the food. It's about why. If you eat a big meal out or you make a bad choice, were you upset? Were you having a rough day? So if you food journal, start writing it down, but also write down what you're feeling at the time you're eating it. I'm telling you, it will kind of put a whole new spin on things. So if you are realizing you are eating out of emotional, whatever, good, bad, or otherwise, then you can start to say, okay, what do I really want? Why am I really here? Let's say some girl in your ballet class gets the part that you wanted. You come home, you stuff your face. All right, it's not because you wanted to. Why? What do I really want? You want that part. You want to feel better. You want her to not have that part. So once you can identify the why, maybe do something else to make yourself feel better. Again, it's not about the food. Maybe go get a manicure, go for a walk, go, watch your favorite show, curl up with a good book, go play with your dog. Start realizing when those episodes happen that you can replace it with something else, and then you won't feel as guilty afterwards, because that's what we tend to do to ourselves. We'll eat, and then not only do we feel bad because we didn't get the part, we feel bad because now we feel fat and gross and ugly, and you make yourself feel twice as worse. So once you are kind of identifying this, you go, okay, I just came home and ate an entire bag of chips because I'm really upset that so-and-so got that part. Okay, you know what? I don't need the chips. The chips are going to make me feel worse. What can I do instead? And then come up with some other alternative other than eating. Now, the thing to be aware of is it's going to take time. This is not going to happen overnight. Eating is sort of sometimes second nature and just a habit that you're going to have to break, and habits take a while to break. So be kind to yourself about this. If you end up really trying and then all of a sudden have a bad day again, don't beat yourself up about it. It's one time. Don't blow your diet for a week because you had one mess up. So be aware that it's going to take time. Be aware that this is not a quick fix and that it might take a little bit of effort to break that habit. But if you slowly work to it, you can get there. Let's say you're having an emotional eating episode 3 times a week. Well, what if you can back that down to once a week? That's progress. That's huge. So be kind to yourself about it. It's not going to just happen like that. If you're an emotional eater in that you are a binge eater, and then you binge and starve and binge and starve. That's a little bit different. That can sometimes be a food addiction. And I will give you some tips with that, but my first tip is to go get some professional help, because that's a little bit different than just eating out of misery. If you are in this sort of binge and starve cycle, that's a part of an eating disorder, which we talked about in the eating disorder video. Again, it's not to beat yourself up, it's not to say you're a horrible person, but that might be some time you might need a little bit of extra help, other than just food journaling or, writing things down, because oftentimes that'll re-trigger you, and just the way brains work is that you might need a little bit extra help. But if you are a binge eater, if you are an emotional eater, the thing I would start advising you to do, as crazy as this sounds, start really having what you want for mealtime. Because most of us, if you're a binge eater or if you're an emotional eater, have really skimpy meals. Like, I'm just going to have lettuce and dressing for my lunch. Or I'm going to have a little teeny breakfast, or I'm going to have a banana. And then you end up being so hungry later and so miserable that that's when you blow your diet. That's also a type of emotional eating. So what I want you to start doing, as crazy as this sounds, okay, for breakfast, what do I really want? Do I really want an omelet and toast? Do I really want cereal? Do I really want yogurt and fruit? Do I really want pancakes? Ask yourself, all right, what do I really want? And you might say, oh, that's just going to make me fat. Well, if you are satisfied at meal times, you are far less likely to have an emotional eating episode or a binge eating episode later on. Because I found, like I said in the eating disorders video, when I was a lot younger, I was so obsessed with what I was eating. I counted every calorie. At one point when I was like 15, I was consumed by food. And then what would end up happening to me is eventually I was so hungry and so miserable that I would just go nuts. But if I had actually had a good lunch, had a good breakfast, I'm talking about good, healthy, decent, satisfying meals. If I had done that, while I thought the weight loss might have taken longer, in actuality, it would have been shorter, because I wouldn't have done all this and then gained it all back with a binge. So I know that sounds scary, to those of us who are like, no, I have to eat nothing but lettuce. If you go ahead and have decent meals, you're going to be much more satisfied. And you're not going to have as many binge or emotional eating problems. If you had told me that, though, at 15, I would have thought, you have got to be crazy. I am going to gain 20 pounds in 2 days and whatever. But in actuality, it really works. Because then you start getting into the habit of knowing your next meal is coming. I think a lot of us also who've had emotional eating problems or binging problems, it's because we think, I have to starve. I have to starve to get my weight off. I have to not eat anything. And then we kind of get it all in the binge thinking, okay, this is my one chance to eat. This is my one chance to eat whatever I want. And then I'll go back to dieting. And that messes up your brain like you cannot imagine. So again, this is going to take some time. This is something that does not happen overnight. Start having that oatmeal and fruit, or that omelet and toast. It doesn't have to be pancakes. You can be satisfied with a healthy meal that is substantial enough. And then you'll start to get into really healthy meals. You'll start to know that, okay, I don't have to kind of get it all in one sitting because I'm going to starve later. And it will start to change your brain. That's how I changed mine when I was younger. What ended up happening with me is that I joined New York City Ballet, and I realized that I needed to eat more, and I had to eat more for my job. And so I started eating, meals as food as fuel, and eating the oatmeal and eating a little bit, while healthy, much more substantial meals, especially breakfast, and then a good dinner. And then I started to realize, okay, I'm not going to gain weight like this. I'm actually going to be eating less than I was when I was starving and then binging. Because, guys, the reality is the amount of calories you can eat in a binge might be more than you would eat in an entire day if you had good, healthy, substantial meals. So while it seems really scary that, oh, if I start doing that, I'm going to gain weight, you might end up losing weight because you'll be eating less from those emotional eating times and those eating cycles. So that's what I encourage you to do. I know you might think I'm crazy. I know you might think you have lost your mind, but start being a little bit kinder to yourself and allowing yourself more at meal times, because then you will be less likely to be hungry later, which is kind of what ends up happening with a lot of us in those emotional eating cycles or binging cycles, is because we're so hungry because we didn't start the day well, then you end up eating twice as much anyway. So be kinder to yourself, eat good meals, allow yourself a cheat every once in a while, because that's the other thing. If you don't allow yourself a cheat, ever, I'm never gonna have this, I'm never gonna have this, I'm never gonna have this, most of us don't have the discipline to keep that up forever. Then you're going to have a major, oh, I need sugar so badly and blah, 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 and then you're just going to eat 10,000 times more than if you had allowed yourself the one cookie every once in a while. So be kinder to yourself. Start, like I said at the beginning, start writing down what you're eating and what you're feeling while you're eating it, because that's more important than the food itself in terms of emotional eating. So if you can start to pinpoint those feelings and start to say, okay, you know what, I am doing this because I am miserable, not because I actually want this ice cream, then you can start to change it. So just be aware, be kind to yourself, and the most important thing to remember, guys, is that this is going to be a slow process. If you have any sort of eating disordered thinking, I'm not talking about anorexia, bulimia, the high ends of the spectrum, like again we talked about in that video, there's a big spectrum of disordered eating. You know, anorexia and bulimia are at the total ends, but there's a lot of people in that gray middle area. So if you have any kind of disordered eating, it's going to take some time to get over. But as a living example, I got over all of my sort of weird food brain challenges that I had when I was younger, and you will get out of it. You will be able to be normal again. It just is going to take some time, and if you're really struggling, you might need to see somebody about it and have a little bit of extra help. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people think, oh, I don't want to go into therapy. I don't want to see an eating disorder nutritionist person. Why? If they're going to help you, if they're going to change your brain and so you can live the rest of your life happy and not obsessed with food, why wouldn't you? You know, so don't be afraid to go see somebody. They can really, really help you with that, and just know it's going to take time. So if this helped you, you know, I always try to throw one of these serious videos here every once in a while. Please let me know in the comments. Give it a thumbs up and I'll do more like this, because we haven't really gotten into serious topics, but I think now we can start to. Because we've kind of done how to be a dancer and all the technique, but now I think we can start to dive into some more serious stuff. So leave me a comment if you're struggling with this, and know you're not alone. You know, like we talked about in the period video, you're not alone. A lot of us struggle with this. If you missed my video on the proper facial expressions in ballet, it's right there. You can click it to watch. I love you all so, so much. I'm so glad I can be here to help you with all this. I love you all, and I'll see you on Friday.